Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to Talk Like a Leader. This week's episode is titled, Is Conflict Always a Bad Thing? You know, conflict definitely sounds bad. I don't know about you. I think it feels bad. I think there are actually very few people who look forward to what we would call a conflict discussion. Frankly, more people avoid or look to escape conflict discussions than are willing to actively participate in them. So conflict certainly has a negative emotional aspect for most people, and frankly, it feels bad for most people. Is conflict always a bad thing, though? In this episode, I'm going to explore this question and offer a perspective to help you build your conflict confidence as a leader. And first, let's look at a definition of conflict so we're all on the same page here. I'm going to use a definition proposed by Craig Grundy and Tim Flanagan in their book, Becoming a Conflict Competent Leader. It's a definition of conflict that I really like, and mostly because it captures so many parts of the way we think about conflict so that we can address it more productively. So here's their definition. Conflict is any situation in which interdependent people have apparently incompatible interests, goals, principles, or feelings. I'll say that again. Any situation in which interdependent people have apparently incompatible interests, goals, principles, or feelings. Now, a couple of key words to hinge on here, to really focus on. One word to notice is the word interdependent. And I think the importance of recognizing this word is that conflict involves situations, or at least the kind of conflicts we're talking about in the context of Talk Like a Leader. The parties involved are interdependent, not independent. Now, while they are independent individuals, they are working in a context, in an organizational setting, in a family dynamic, in a business setting, in some kind of setting where their words, actions, decisions, results, work outputs affect other people, and maybe they depend on each other to get work done. They're not independent of each other. They are interdependent, meaning we really do have to figure out a way to make this work. So any situation in which interdependent people who really do need to work together, have apparently incompatible interests, goals, principles, or feelings. And I think apparently is important because it touches on the idea that so much of the time what we perceive as a conflict is an apparent incompatibility rather than an actual incompatibility. The number of biases that we bring to the conversation, the assumptions we make about how clearly we've communicated, how well we've been understood, how well we understand others, how much we understand about their intentions, their desires, their needs, their interests. That a lot of these apparent differences are not real differences. That if we were to stop long enough to understand the assumptions that we bring to the table, both of us, the biases that we bring to the table, both of us, if we would take a moment to get past the biases and past the assumptions, we might find that we don't have incompatible interests, goals, principles, or feelings. We actually have compatible interests, goals, principles, or feelings. We just have different viewpoints or perspectives on how to satisfy those interests, goals, principles, or feelings. So they are apparently incompatible rather than actually incompatible. And it's that mindset that we bring to conflict, recognizing there's an apparent incompatibility rather than an actual incompatibility, that sets the stage for clear communication, clear understanding, and successfully resolved conflict. Now, in March of 2019, I recorded an episode of Talk Like a Leader titled 6 Questions for Collaborative Communication. And because of some illnesses and travel problems in the last 2 weeks with me and my team, we actually re-released that episode last week rather than record an episode. So it's up for review, and I'll have a link for it in the show notes here. In that episode, I talked about 6 questions you can ask yourself in order to have better and clearer collaborative communication when you're trying to solve another problem with another person. And I think it's the foundation for addressing these apparent incompatibilities we have in conflict situations. Okay, so that's just backdrop information about the question, is conflict always a bad thing? Let me quote from another book, Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, where he points out that the second dysfunction of a team, the second of the 5 hierarchical dysfunctions that lead to teams not getting results, is the fear of conflict. And he lists it right after what he calls the foundational dysfunction, the absence of trust. I'd suggest if you haven't read this book, you probably want to, because it's a really good foundational book to grow in your leadership journey and understand how teams work and how you can work better in a team environment. But he points out that fear of conflict is actually a dysfunction. And I happen to agree with him. So what I'm going to suggest is that conflict is not always a bad thing, although it almost always feels bad. And it's this dealing with the tension between something feeling bad and being actually bad that can get in the way of our effective leadership communication. You know, conflict is just a normal and natural thing. It's a thing that happens in the interaction of people in the workplace, people who have different experiences, different education levels, different perspectives, different parts of the business they're responsible for, different organizational objectives that are all intersecting to achieve the objective of our business or organization. So conflict is a natural thing. It's not always bad. In fact, I would suggest that, as Lencioni says, I agree with him, that fear of conflict, running from conflict, refusal to engage in productive conflict can actually hurt your business or organization rather than help it. Running from conflict is not a good thing. I think that conflict can be bad and can blow a business apart, as I did say, productive conflict. And so I'll give you some thoughts for what's the difference between a productive conflict and a not productive conflict, or I'll call it constructive versus destructive conflict. The hallmarks of destructive conflict, and I would say conflict that maybe avoid isn't the right word, maybe steer in a constructive direction is a better idea. The hallmarks of a destructive conflict conversation are that they focus on the people involved, people's perspectives, people's intentions, assumptions about the people. So destructive conflict is focused on the people involved rather than the issue or the problem we're trying to solve. The contrasting point or constructive conflict focus would be issues or problems. So destructive conflict is focused on people and personalities and assumptions about intent. Constructive conflict is focused on the issue or the problem we're trying to solve. Destructive conflict is focused on the past, bringing up past issues, trying to fix the past, trying to fix something we can't change anyway. Constructive conflict is focused on the future or what we're going to do differently in the future. Destructive conflict drives polarization and division within an organization. It creates picking sides, choosing who I am for or against, demonizing other people. Kind of the polarization and division idea is an expansion of the focused on people idea. And constructive conflict is focused on not just the issue and not just the future, also solving the problem that we face or painting a different future than we're currently headed towards, improving our current situation. I think when we deal with significant issues, when we talk about the future state of our business or organization, when we try to solve problems, it's very likely we're going to have conflict because we're going to have different perspectives, different opinions, different ways to move forward. Ways I think that you can move conflict from a bad thing to a good thing, though, are to stay out of the destructive, focused on people, past, and polarization, move into the constructive, focused on issues, the future, and problem solving. Use the 6 questions for collaborative problem solving I proposed in the episode I mentioned earlier, and change your perspective to say that conflict is not a bad thing, even though it feels bad. Conflict can be a good thing because it helps to solve problems and identify new solutions to old issues. If you can focus on constructive conflict over destructive conflict, master the bad feeling of it, and move forward constructively with your team, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.